So mercury weakens immunity to viral infections people are already carrying. Potentially speaking, a child receives a vaccine with mercury in it, and if they're already carrying a virus, reactivation occurs, and potentially, if that reactivation occurs in the brain, we could see autism develop.
Because of COVID, became aware of a lot of things in medicine that I wasn't. That the mainstream medical publications like the Journal of American Medicine, all the big ones, BMJ, they're all corrupted and co-opted by big pharma money, just like medical boards are, just like medical research is. They all work together with Fauci, and he's the one who divvied out the research fund. So it was one big cabal of money that corrupted the whole medical system. And so then you get into the idea of, oh, well, as RFK's been telling you, that the childhood vaccine schedule is now at 72 shots. People, when I tell people that, their jaws go on the floor. And then that most of those were never tested against a placebo. Like that, these are facts. And it kind of blows their mind. And so now I want to, we just had a whistleblower on who said they discovered that vaccines had a connection to autism at the CDC, and they suppressed it. So you can go watch that video. I just dropped it today. But now we have on another gentleman who wrote a paper in a peer-reviewed publication. His name is Matthew Cormier. He is an independent medical researcher, author, known for his peer-reviewed work on the potential link between vaccine-induced viral reactivation and autism spectrum disorder. His research published in the journal, here it is, published in the Journal of Independent Medicine, proposes a novel hypothesis that vaccines may trigger autism by reactivating latent viral infections in susceptible individuals. Welcome to the show, Matthew Cormier. Hi, Matthew.
Hi, Jimmy. How are you? Thank you very much for having me on.
I'm doing great. Thanks for coming on. So now this is the journal that you got published. Now, for just before we even get into it, why would they publish this if it's a peer? I thought they don't they always find a reason not to publish this kind of work. How did you get it published?
This is a newer journal, and it's established by the Independent Medical Alliance. It's called the Journal of Independent Medicine. And really, the focus of this journal and of IMA as a whole is to get away from censorship, like you talked about, like the corruption between pharmaceutical companies and the established mainstream, what's considered legacy medical journals, and start getting good research out there that doesn't adhere to the conventional narratives.
Oh, so that makes a lot more sense, because my spidey senses go up. I'm like, wait a minute, they wouldn't normally. So that's now that does make sense. Okay, so this is an independent. So it says it right in their name, Journal of Independent Medicine. So this is new. These are doctors, I guess, and they figured out that the normal medical journals are corrupted by money in many different ways. One of them is big pharma, and so that's and so they started this. So is that correct, or do you not know?
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's pretty much the premise. Right now, it's run by a gentleman by the name of Joseph Verone, who I have a tremendous amount of respect for. And the entire organization, the Independent Medical Alliance, I can't say enough good things about them.
Okay, great. This is really great to find out that something like this exists and that it happened. And so now take us through what you found out about vaccine-induced viral reactivation and an autism spectrum disorder.
So essentially, the goal of my research was to establish a causal mechanism on the potential link between vaccines and autism. There's been countless reports of parents coming forward claiming that their child received a vaccine or a series of vaccines and went on to develop progressive autism. They were never the same again. But that's not the case for all children. There's a lot of children that receive vaccines and they're relatively fine afterwards. So the goal of my research was to establish the variable. Who are the children at risk? What's the mechanism? In order to do that, the first aspect of my investigation was to remove vaccines from the equation. Let's take vaccines out of the discussion. What is autism? What causes autism? And when I started investigating that and going through medical literature at the confirmed environmental risk factors for autism, one aspect and one risk that kept jumping out was viral infections. There's research dating back to, I'm sorry, go ahead, Jimmy.
No, go ahead. Well, I was just going to say that I was always under the impression, or most recently was under the impression, that it was brain inflammation that caused autism. Would you agree with that?
Yes,
okay.
Essentially, yes.
Okay, so go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
No problem. Okay, so going back to the 1970s, there was really important research conducted and documented showing an established link between rubella virus infection in pregnant women and a greatly increased risk of having an autistic child. Moving forward in the 1980s and 1990s, a similar correlation was shown between viruses like CMV and herpes simplex type 2. It was shown that basically what the research implies is that viral infections acquired during pregnancy, vertical transmission can happen from mother to developing baby, and a viral infection can cross the placenta, infect the fetus, and trigger a neurological pathology, an inflammatory pathology in the brain. So recently, the same correlation and the same connection was shown between COVID-19 infection in pregnant women and a greater risk of having an autistic child. So viruses during pregnancy, they're an established risk. Moving forward from that, I kept investigating this, the link between viruses and autism. And I came across extremely damning evidence involving herpes simplex, the virus behind cold sores, herpes simplex type 1. And what the research was showing was that let me preface this. Viral encephalitis is where a viral infection crosses the blood-brain barrier and makes it into the brain and triggers an inflammatory pathology. There's multiple case studies showing healthy neurotypical people. They had no symptom presentation of autism whatsoever across various age groups, children, teenagers, middle-aged adults, that experienced a bout with herpes simplex encephalitis, where the virus made it into their brain, and that was the trigger for autism. Shortly thereafter, they started experiencing symptoms, and they went on to receive a clinical diagnosis, and after having herpes simplex encephalitis, they were autistic from there on out, the rest of their lives. So herpes simplex encephalitis was a direct trigger. That's a documented environmental trigger for autism. There's further research. I mentioned herpes simplex type 2 in pregnant women and a greater risk of autistic children. There was another really important study that came out examining autoimmune antibodies in the brain, viral infections, and autism compared to a healthy control group of children. And basically what the research found was that autistic children, let me back up 1 second. The global rate of herpes simplex type 2 is about 13%. So 13% of the population globally are carriers for herpes simplex type 2. In this particular study...
That goes up in places like Hollywood, just to let you know.
Yeah, okay. That's probably true. Yeah, Jimmy. I don't have no doubt about that. What the researcher found was that in the autistic group of children, 65% of them were carrying herpes simplex type 2, compared to a 13% global population rate. So that's huge. That's huge. 65% of the children in this study were carriers for herpes simplex type 2. And not only that, they tested positive for IgM antibodies, which are indicative of acute or active infection. Of these children that tested positive for herpes simplex, active herpes simplex infection, 96% of them had autoimmune antibodies in the brain. So this is considered strong data. There is a very, very high association here between viral infections, particularly viruses that have a preference for the central nervous system, like herpes simplex, and autism. There's a link. Any established, credentialed expert in the field will agree with me on that. They'll say, yes, viral infections can be involved in causing autism. The second aspect of my research was to, answer the question and investigate if viral infections are involved in causing autism, where do vaccines come into play? And when I started researching this and exploring the public medical databases, I came across a phenomenon known as vaccine-induced viral reactivation, which essentially it's where a person receives a vaccine and any dormant or latent viruses they're already carrying reactivate and they begin actively replicating. And this can trigger various inflammatory pathologies, but in the context of the discussion on autism, if a vaccine reactivates a virus a child is already carrying, let's say like herpes simplex, that he may have caught from his mother or shortly after birth, that virus can reactivate and now trigger viral encephalitis. And
meaning again, just so people know, when you say viral encephalitis, I've always understood to mean inflammation of the brain.
Right, okay. Exactly, correct, okay. Right. So to kind of bring it up to speed, viral infections are documented to be involved in causing autism, particularly viral infections of the brain. Common viruses like herpes simplex, that's a big one. What the research is suggesting is that these viruses are acquired during pregnancy, from mother to baby, or shortly after birth. And vaccines, and this is where we get into discussion on adjuvants or preservatives like mercury, but vaccines can reactivate viruses children are already carrying. And if a vaccine reactivates a virus and it makes its way into the brain, it can trigger viral encephalitis, which is a documented trigger for autism. This research has never been addressed or documented or spoken of by any of the other experts in the field. It's novel.
So, let me see if I understand exactly what you're saying. You're saying that when a woman is pregnant and she catches a virus, the virus, let's say herpes, she can then pass it to her baby.
Correct.
And that's called vertical
transmission.
So then the baby's born and that virus goes dormant in the baby, right? And so,
right. Yep.
And then at some point along the 72 shots that babies now get, vaccine shots that they get, at some point, one of those shots reactivates that dormant virus. The virus then becomes active. It crosses the blood-brain barrier, creates brain inflammation or encephalitis, and that induces autism.
Exactly.
And then it would be the amount of inflammation or that equals the amount of autism, right? So
correct.
Okay.
Yes, exactly. As I was mentioning, there's been a lot of research. I saw your previous guest, Brian Hooker. There's been a lot of research on adjuvants. Or years ago, RFK Jr. was talking about the preservative mercury used in vaccines.
Is that thimerosal?
Thimerosal, correct. Ethyl mercury.
Okay.
But what's not being looked at and what was never answered is, well, if vaccines are causing autism, if it's ethyl mercury or if it's aluminum adjuvants, how come this isn't happening across the board? Why is this happening to some children and not others?
Oh, okay.
In my research, my hypothesis is that the biological variable is underlying viral infections like herpes simplex that children are already carrying.
And so do you think that, do you have a theory on what inside the vaccine triggers the reactivation of the virus? Could it be the adjuvants, meaning aluminum or ethyl mercury?
Right. Yes. That's entirely plausible. Really, when we get into a discussion on immunology, vaccines and their adjuvants or their preservatives, they trigger an allergic reaction. And when the immune system, to put it very simply, when the immune system is busy dealing with an allergy, it undermines the arm of the immune system responsible for addressing viral infections. So you're putting off an IgE allergic reaction, and now the immune system that was taking care of these dormant infections, keeping them viruses dormant, it becomes weakened, it becomes suppressed.
Because your immune system focuses on this. No, so let me just explain to people what an adjuvant is. An adjuvant is something like aluminum that they put into a vaccine to make your immune system react because it's a poison, it's toxic. And so when your immune system responds to, so they have the vaccine, they put aluminum in there, your body sees that as a poison, toxic. It reacts to it, and you're saying that it reacts to that aluminum, and that at the detriment to the rest of the immune system that was keeping those viruses dormant.
Exactly.
Okay.
Right. That's the premise.
Okay.
That's the premise of my research.
And an adjuvant is put in there on purpose to make your body react that way, because that, under the idea of how vaccines work, that allergic reaction to the aluminum is what then makes the body or the immune system identify whatever was there with that aluminum. So let's say it was, a virus for a vaccine for like polio or something. So then when you inject the polio, you also inject the aluminum. So now every time it sees the polio come into your body, it's going to react the same way it did to the aluminum. Am I getting it correct, or?
Pretty much. Okay. Yeah, you're in the ballpark.
Okay, so I'm just trying to make it so average people who are C students like me can understand.
Sure. The basics of vaccines is that it contains an antigen, which would be, let's say, an attenuated virus or a deactivated virus. And then you have an adjuvant. And an adjuvant, primarily, it's to provoke an adaptive immune response. And that's how you develop IgG antibodies. But in order to do that, you have to disrupt innate immune function, the body's first line of defense. Because if you give someone a vaccine with just an antigen and no adjuvant, nothing happens. They don't produce IgG antibodies. They don't get sick. Technically speaking, they will not acquire immunity.
Okay. So it's and they've actually banned thimerosal, which is one of the adjuvants, right? And where are we with aluminum? Are they still putting aluminum in vaccines?
They are, yes, absolutely.
But they call it something else, don't they?
Aluminum is still being used. Ethyl mercury was removed. Ethyl mercury is still in the certain vaccines, like the flu vaccines, still use thimerosal.
Really?
But aluminum is still being used.
Really?
Yeah.
This is, wow. I didn't know this. I thought they got rid of it. Wow. Well, we know the flu vaccine, well, according to the latest study by the Cleveland Clinic, it makes you 27. If you get the flu vaccine, you are 27% more likely to get the flu and get sick from it.
Right. It
has what they call negative efficacy.
Yes.
Meaning you're better. Yes. You are less likely. You are more likely to get the flu and get sick from it if you get vaccinated. And they still recommend it up and down everywhere in every corner. Okay.
I think.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Jimmy. I think the most important aspect of this discussion, because there's a lot of people and credentialed experts that claim that vaccines save a lot of lives and they prevent a lot of transmittable illnesses. Okay. And on the other side of it is that there's a growing number of people saying that vaccines have injured them. Parents coming forward and saying that my child developed autism as a result of vaccines. But at the core of this discussion really is, in my opinion, what's creating susceptibility to viruses? Do we really need vaccines to stop viral epidemics? And when you investigate that and you go through the medical literature, you'll see that there are environmental risk factors and there are variables involved in viral transmission and disease. To put it kind of simply, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this, during COVID, there were people that were being directly exposed to the virus before vaccines were introduced. Maybe, for instance, your wife or husband caught COVID, you're sleeping in the same bed with them, you're sharing close quarters, there's direct transmission, but they never test positive. They never get sick, and there's no pathology observed. And there's a lot of research showing establishing this same connection and exploring viral transmission on other viruses as well, like HIV. There was a really important study that came out examining people in relationships where one of them is a carrier for HIV, and they followed these people for several years. And in the entire study, there wasn't one case of documented HIV transmission from the infected partner to the uninfected, regardless of whether or not they were practicing safe sex and things of that nature. So, as I was mentioning, I think we should be talking about what's creating susceptibility to viruses.
And
If
what
we
do you
go down that,
what do you
go
think it
ahead.
is?
If you investigate this and you look at the medical literature, that jumped out to me was exposure to heavy metal toxins. There's several studies in animal models and multiple in humans as well, but I'll give you an example. In 2021, a study was published looking at the connection between mercury toxin exposure and avian influenza, bird flu in birds. And what the researchers found was that birds that were being exposed to mercury from unchecked environmental pollution in California, they were 5 times more likely to test positive for the bird flu compared to birds that were not mercury toxic. And the researchers went on to conduct further tests, and it was shown that mercury exposure was disrupting the bird's innate immune responses. That's what was facilitating viral transmission and a subsequent disease process. There's other studies showing the same connection. Mercury exposure and increased risks of herpes simplex, heavy metal toxin exposure like cadmium, lead, etc., and increased risk for HIV or CMV or Epstein-Barr virus. So it's pretty well established that heavy metal toxins will greatly impact a person's immune response to a viral infection and whether or not transmission occurs.
Ooh. So
when you look at that research and then you look at how, go ahead.
So Jimmy. You're tying you're talking about when you say heavy metal. So would you consider the mercury and the aluminum they put in vaccines a heavy metal?
Yes. Oh. Mercury in particular. Absolutely. When you look at the research showing how mercury will impair someone's immune response to a viral infection, it'll suppress their viral immunity. And then you realize that mercury is being used in vaccines for nearly a century. That plays back into my original hypothesis. So mercury weakens immunity to viral infections people are already carrying. Potentially speaking, a child receives a vaccine with mercury in it, and if they're already carrying a virus, reactivation occurs, and potentially, if that reactivation occurs in the brain, we could see autism develop.
And so that's why. So the theory is, would you agree with so the more vaccines that we give a child, the more likely that child is to have a reactivated virus. And so that would be why we have such an explosion of autism since the 80s, since they passed that liability shield and they exploded the vaccine schedule from, 4 or 5 shots to 72. Would that be, is what I'm saying correct?
It's certainly plausible. When it comes to autism, just like any other disease and condition, it's multifactorial.
Right.
So even if we were to remove vaccines, we were to get rid of the vaccine schedule, we're still being exposed to toxins like mercury, cadmium, lead on a daily basis. A congressional report came out in 2022 showing that all of the baby food in the country, even organic baby food, contained dangerous levels of heavy metal toxins like mercury, lead, or cadmium.
How could that? What? How could? Why? How could they? How do they not recall all the baby food? What? I don't. How could that possibly be happening?
I think the problem is so widespread that there's no choice to recall the baby food. Otherwise, we'd have issues with famine and starvation. Essentially, it's unchecked environmental pollution contaminating our food supply. And the people involved, and the people really, our regulatory agencies are asleep at the wheel. The people running our healthcare institutions are beholden to pharmaceutical companies and politicians. So things like this keep happening. One thing that's in the ballpark, it's a little off topic, but it's in the ballpark. And Jimmy, I'll say this, is that one of the most significant events in the history of mankind is the fact that all of our body temperatures have dropped globally around the world. 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit was the average globally for over a century. And in the last 25 to 30 years, our body temperatures have all dropped. 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit is no longer the average.
What is it?
Estimates are between 97.7 and 97.9 degrees Fahrenheit. So we've dropped nearly an entire degree. And essentially, what the research suggests, what the research shows is that our immune systems are becoming suppressed across the board, collectively as a species. Body temperature, a person's body temperature is one of the greatest indicators of overall immune function and what's known as basal metabolic rate, which is a person's ability to turn calories from food they're eating into energy. So when we see body temperatures dropping, really what we're talking about hormonal imbalances, nervous system problems, and metabolic disease and suppressed immune response to infections. So traditionally speaking, if a person acquires a virus or any type of infection, the response is fever. Okay.
Right.
And that gets into a discussion on a thermal exclusion zone. Infections are opportunistic. They cannot stand high body temperatures. So you mount a fever, it clears the infection. And what's happening is that because our body temperatures are dropping, viruses, infections are becoming chronic. We get into a discussion on chronic Lyme disease. We get into a discussion on long COVID. We get into a discussion on long Epstein-Barr. And our immune systems are suppressed. We're not mounting proper inflammatory responses to clear infections anymore. That's basically the nature of chronic illness.
So, wow. So this study really has far-reaching implications. Have you gotten this in front of Jay Bhattacharya or Dr. Marty Makary or RFK himself?
I actually have a paper on this, on our body temperatures dropping around the world, that's being peer reviewed right now. But I created an investigative documentary series on this already. Episodes 1 and 2 are out right now. But to be honest with you, this should be making headlines around the world. I don't know why the people running our current healthcare system, whether it's Robert F. Kennedy Jr. or Jay Bhattacharya, aren't addressing this.
So have you tried to get this to them?
Not yet. I have to wait until my paper is published.
So it's not published yet?
My paper on vaccines is published.
Oh, so that's what I'm talking
yes.
about this. Have you gotten this in front of?
Yes.
And so have you corresponded with them?
I've had correspondence with members of the ACIP.
Oh, okay.
And from what I've been told, my paper has reached Jay Bhattacharya.
Okay, so you haven't heard anything directly back?
I haven't, not yet, no.
Okay, well, I can make sure that all those people see this. So
I would appreciate that, Jimmy.
I just did a tour in Hawaii with Dr. Robert Malone speaking.
Really?
Yeah, speaking about vaccine. We were there in aid of pushing a new a bill that would give the right of parents to opt their kids out of vaccines. So we did a bunch of public appearances.
I saw that.
Yeah, so I was there. He was there with me. We had, I love Robert Malone. He's a great guy.
Yeah, likewise.
So okay, well, I will get this out to all the people that I know. Put it that way.
I really appreciate that, Jimmy. I mean, you're already doing me a great service by having me on tonight. If anyone is watching this and they want to inquire, one of the biggest things you can do to spread awareness is to share this episode. Share it with friends, family, coworkers, anyone you know with an autistic child. Share this episode that you're watching now with them. Get this out there, because in order for this movement to work, it takes everyone being proactive.
Okay, well, I'm doing what I can do. I'm going to spread it as much as I can spread it. Let me know. Is there anything else that I didn't ask you that I should have and that you want to say?
If anyone's interested in following up further on my research, my Substack's a great place to subscribe to see how this progresses, which would be, you can find my Substack at healthuncensored.com.
Okay, healthuncensored.com. And where's this? So are you doing a video series?
On my Substack, I have a documentary series on the decline of our body temperatures around the world. I also have a video research presentation for my study on vaccines and autism.
Okay, and that's all available at your Substack?
Yep, healthuncensored.com.
Matthew Cormier, I really appreciate you doing this research. I appreciate you sticking your neck out, and thanks for making time for our show. And hopefully we could have you back on.
Likewise, Jimmy. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Wow, see me on tour. I'll be in Lansing, Milwaukee, Albuquerque, Houston, Dallas, Salt Lake City, Las Vegas. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets. If you go anywhere else, you're going to pay more.